In 1940, faced with an increasingly complex situation, New Zealand proposed a series of weapons development plans due to the lack of sufficient military strength at the time, attempting to create its own armored weapons, one of which was the Scofield tank. New Zealand itself had no experience in tank development. In fact, the Scofield tank was designed by the American General Motors. Although it was designed during World War II, it still had the style of the 1930s. Considering that tanks needed to be produced in New Zealand and the country did not have sufficient industrial capacity, the designers tried to use some commercial designs as much as possible. The tank chassis was modified from a truck chassis, and the weapon system was of the British Vickers series. The designers believed that this approach would allow New Zealand to complete production preparations in the shortest time possible. Considering the mobility requirements proposed by New Zealand, the designers adopted a combined mobility system, namely a dual-purpose wheeled and tracked mode. The tank chassis was based on a Chevrolet PhD commercial truck, with some new designs added to complement the chassis structure. It was powered by an 85-horsepower engine, with power transmitted to the rear through a mechanical transmission device. The running gear consisted of tracks and 4 rubber wheels, with the tracks having a trapezoidal structure and a longer track length. The 4 small-diameter road wheels used British Horstman suspension. Perhaps because the chassis was based on a truck chassis, an additional beam structure was added on both sides to connect the road wheels and idlers. The wheeled running structure was quite unique, with the rear wheels serving as drive wheels mounted on the outside of the tracks, and the front wheels serving as steering wheels mounted on the inside of the tracks with a narrow wheelbase. They could switch modes by adjusting the wheels up and down, with the front wheels retracting and storing in a semicircular space at the front, while the rear wheels turned forward and retracted into a protective box above the front. When using the wheeled structure to travel, the midsection of the tracks needed to be suspended 10 centimeters off the ground with ropes to prevent the tracks from dragging on the ground. Because this wheeled structure had no resilient suspension and was almost rigidly connected, it could increase highway travel speed but would cause a lot of shaking. The tank's armor was very thin, only able to withstand light weapons fire. However, the designers provided comprehensive protection, with even the rear storage boxes having basic protective capabilities. The tank's weaponry was weak, initially only having 2 Vickers 303 machine guns, one mounted in a spherical machine gun seat to the left of the driver, and one mounted in a small rotating turret at the rear. There were many racks inside the tank to store machine gun bullets. The tank used a 3-person crew with a driver, co-driver, and vehicle commander. The driver was responsible for the main driving work, and the armored structure above his head could be raised to provide a wider field of view, but raising it would affect the turret rotation. The co-driver sat next to the driver and also operated the front machine gun. The vehicle commander stayed in the turret alone. After training, the crew needed nearly 10 minutes to switch the tank from tracked to wheeled mode, while switching from wheeled to tracked mode took about 7 minutes. During this conversion process, the crew members needed to operate outside the vehicle, so this operating method was not suitable for execution on the battlefield. In actual testing, people found that this tank was not very practical. For example, the engine was installed in a poorly ventilated compartment, making it prone to overheating and failure. The vehicle's turning performance was not very good, and it was prone to tipping over when making sharp turns in wheeled mode. The configuration of 2 machine guns was too weak, and at a minimum, a small caliber cannon needed to be installed. Overall, the Scofield tank's performance was unsatisfactory, and its overall combat capability was not even as good as some light-wheeled armored vehicles. The New Zealand military was not satisfied with this tank, and only 3 prototype vehicles were produced. The Scofield tank weighed approximately 6 tons, was 4.2 meters long, 2.7 meters wide, and about 2.5 meters high. In wheeled mode, it had a maximum speed of 40 kilometers per hour and a maximum range of 560 kilometers.